Chapter 6 Dark Nights. The shore was reached, at last. They could finally feel the earth again, but their night was a challenge like never before. The biomes they'd crossed, the beings they'd fought, and the things they'd seen had caused such exhaustion. They hadn't felt like that since they first set foot in Uranium, back when they were about to fight Mordor for the second time. This meant that their feet didn't touch the ground for very long when they all collapsed at the spot and fell unconscious. For a short while, they forgot about their quest and their feelings. They forgot about what had happened, and Julia forgot about what Drake had done. Everyone forgot about the night. But for Drake, much darker nights were upon him. One by one they woke up, except for Drake. They were being moved around in a wooden cart, carried by a giant lizard. A human was riding the lizard, telling it where to go. The sun had gone up. Haru, Julia, and Maya were awake, somewhat. They were still tired, but after being found and carried onto the cart, the wobbly ride was too much for them not to wake up. They were glad that they were found. Finally, someone was helping them. They were on their way to the only city in Inflatus, but the biggest one in all of Rosium, Aquina. Julia was looking at Drake as he was sleeping. Her fear was replaced by worry. She forgot what happened before she lost consciousness, but it all came back after she woke up. Though she was rather scared of what this meant for Drake, something was unclear and it bothered her. Although there was something else that was about to cause more worry. Drake wasn't just asleep for a while, but they had yet to find out about that. "Drake, wake up!" Ariana yelled. Drake crawled out of his bed and prepared for school. After having gathered everything he needed, he hopped on his bike and left. When he got to the school, he got off his bike, retrieved the key, and went inside. But with one step inside of the school building, everything turned dark. It was so quiet. Drake felt like he was being lifted from the ground and swung through the air as if something possessed him. But when it stopped, he found himself on the ground. Slowly, the darkness decreased and light revealed an ocean. Immediately after, the ground underneath Drake was gone and he fell into the water. He sank, and right before it all turned dark again, two gigantic eyes were staring at him, startling him. The darkness came and went when it revealed a familiar scene. He saw the boy and the girl from his dream again. They were discussing the same thing, but still, he couldn't figure out who they were. All he needed was a few more seconds, because every time the dream ended or it was interrupted, he forgot all about it. But this time it was like he was there. He first entered the palace, opened the great door and approached them. But they didn't notice him, not even the door that just opened. He tried saying hello, but didn't receive a response. He had to see who they were. But when he placed his hand on the girl's shoulder, everything turned dark again. Alone on the sea, in a sloop, Drake now found himself. He saw unusual silhouettes in the water. Monsters, he thought. But then he noticed something he had never seen before. In the distance, he could see land, of which the beach was grey and a mountain was visible. At that time, lava was flowing down the mountain. He realized it was a volcano and assumed it was the place Calypso talked about, the one where everything was dead. But it shocked him when he noticed something off. It wasn't Kratos at all, the island he thought it was. It was Olympus, covered in lava. He saw the temple stick out and melt away. Olympus was falling. Did the prophecy of the end of the age of gods come true after all? The dark nights weren't over yet. In fact, Drake hadn't nearly been through the worst of it. His next nightmare got him falling for kilometers and minutes long. It was like the pit he was falling in would never end. It was so dark he couldn't even see himself. And right before Drake closed his eyes, several things started happening. More people appeared next to him. They were falling with him, but they looked at peace, or rather, emotionless. Drake noticed they weren't just people. He recognized Haru, Julia, and Maya, who were right next to him. He reached for Julia, who was closest to him, and tried to grab her hand. But right before he could touch her, he felt a terrible pain. Drake had started to scream, never having felt something as painful. Everyone had suddenly disappeared, and he was falling on his own again. The pain continued, and it was like his arms and legs were being pierced, but there was nothing to be seen. The moment he stopped falling, the pain vanished and he was sinking instead. And whatever he tried, he couldn't get to the surface. He already feared water more than the usual person, and this just made it a million times worse. The nightmares didn't all feel like nightmares to Drake. Some felt like visions. Some didn't seem to make any sense, though he felt like they all could happen. Maybe not according to every detail, but were these nightmares all really without meaning? It was quiet, once again. Snowflakes were descending, and it was so very cold. He started to hear people crying. He nearly recognized whose crying it was, but there was only one he did fully recognize, his own. Drake was so cold, and something made him feel worse than ever. What had happened? The snowflakes started surrounding him, and something lifted him up in the air. He heard a woman scream and saw a dark figure. The nightmares were so vague. The people seemed so familiar, yet he was never given the chance to figure out who exactly they were. After floating in the air for a while, he was sent down a ravine and fell again. The dark figure kept following him wherever Drake went, and this figure was never going to let him go. Drake thought he woke up because it felt like it, but to his regret, the beginning of his first nightmare repeated itself. Drake, wake up! Drake climbed out of his bed, but as he placed his feet on the floor dissolved and Drake started falling again. All these nights made him fall and fall over and over again until he would lose the last bit of his sanity he had. Drake started screaming for help, but no one would answer. Drake couldn't wake up. Something was withholding him from waking up. He wasn't exactly aware that he was dreaming, but he knew this wasn't real. He missed his friends, his family, and he feared he would never be freed from whatever this was. He's in a dark place, Aquina's elder told the three. He's trapped, and all we and he can do is wait. Is there really no way to wake him? Julia asked. I'm afraid there isn't. I've seen this before, once. With that person it took weeks. We just have to pray he'll wake up sooner than that. We don't have weeks. Then let's pray he's stronger than she was. It had taken several minutes to get the four friends to Aquina. They were very lucky to have been found at that shore. The roads they had traveled on were soggy, but for a giant lizard, pulling a car through the mud was child's play. After their ride through Inflatus, the city of Aquina was quite breathtaking. The city was unlike any they'd ever seen in Rosium, and it was like as they traveled further and further, the city started becoming more and more modern, and the humans became more relatable. The city of Aquina was much like the usual cities in the real world, with tall buildings, steady houses, well-laid paths, roads, and blue flags with their own emblem. It was a wonderful sight, so it was a shame Drake had to miss it all. He was still stuck. There was no time to lose, so the three who were left started going past the houses. The city elder, Tom, had already received a message from Calypso and knew what was upon them. Unlike most, he was someone who wasn't planning on sitting still. While the three went by the houses and asked people about CK, all they got were vague hints that mostly didn't even make any sense. After hours, their search eventually led them to a rather peculiar tower. It was the last hope of finding a clue in Inflatus. The tower didn't have a door, and no one could pass through the entrance. Once inside, a wide marble spiral staircase led them to the top. Along the way, the walls were decorated with paintings of mythical creatures, people, and landscapes. The stained glass windows were letting in beams of light of all kinds of colors. After an exhausting climb, they finally got to the top. Again, no door. They entered and Harold asked, Hello? Anyone there? Ouch! Oh, bugger! Who's there? They heard potion bottles break as they hit the floor, and the cause of it was a stumbling old man who didn't know how to properly organize the items in his tower attic. Oh, not again! The grumpy bearded old man was disappointed to see who had distracted him. Sir, Julia said. What is it? The man yelled angrily. I'm sorry for startling you, but we just wanted to ask you something. Yeah, what do you want? Healing potion? Invisibility? Love? Drunkenness potion? Nah, you seem too young. Actually, we were just wondering if the initial CK meant anything to you. By any chance, does it ring a bell? Yeah, that's my dad. What? I'm kidding, he's dead. Jeez, you're gullible. While the three were shocked for a mere second, after came immediate disappointment. I have no clue. So what's the catch here? No one comes to me for a question like that. Everyone wants something. It's just that. Thanks, though, for your time. Julia turned around. What's it for? The man asked before they left. She turned around again. It's for the sake of the world, she said. The man turned around, facing his workplace. So you are those kids Calypso spoke about in her letter? He suddenly seemed a lot more serious. I'll see what I can find. You sure the end of the world is near? Positive, unfortunately, Julia said. All right, go on now. We'll keep in touch. Thank you, Hong. Yeah, thanks. Julia turned around and was followed by Hara and Maya. Say, what are you? Maya asked bluntly. Hong looked at her and gave her a straightforward answer. I'm a wizard, of course. He smiled, being proud of his profession. Oh, and I suppose you can call me an alchemist as well. It's not like they're very different professions. Maya smiled back, and they went down the stairs again. As they descended, Hong took a few steps towards the entrance and felt like he had to tell them one more thing. There are 3 more islands surrounding the western side of Inflatus. If Aquina hasn't done you well, Mammalian, Gande, or Astro might be able to provide you with more information. Thank you, Julia said. They made their way to the bottom of the tower and headed back to where Drake was being kept safe. Once they reunited, they saw Drake was still asleep. He wasn't looking very good, and sometimes he moved or spoke anxiously. It was a weird feeling, knowing that 3 friends were going to have to go on without him, or at least for the time being. But they had to go on. So they left, and for the first time, without Drake. Drake was home. He found himself on the floor. As he got up, he looked out of the window. Everything was on fire. Only then, Drake could hear again. He heard his sister, mother, and father tell him to come to the underground shelter, which was extremely unusual considering they had none. Come hide with us, his mother said. His mother came for him, but she was barely visible. Honey, come with me. Her face immediately became clear, and it wasn't Ariana. Drake saw the face of the mermaid who had tried to lure him into the ocean. She kept saying, come with me, but Drake couldn't move. She suddenly looked up in great fear. Drake felt the presence of the dark figure again, as it stood behind him. The figure summoned a blue ball of fire, and before he could burn Drake, his mother came in between. No, take me, she screamed. She had her face back, and Drake recognized his mother in her again. She was trying to stop the dark figure, but didn't succeed. She was struck down, and the blue flames engulfed her. The dark figure just looked at her, and then at Drake. Drake could move again, got up and ran up to her. He extinguished the flames and couldn't find any damage, but she didn't move. She was dead. Drake felt like screaming, but couldn't hear his own screams. He got up to get away from the truth. Even though it wasn't, it felt so real. He backed up to where his sister and father stood. His father was wearing a raincoat. Why was he? Drake's father had been gone for months. Whether he left them or had gone missing was still unknown. He remembered when his mother was in distress and Dora was crying because of his leaving, but all he ever shared with his father was his last name. He loved him, but could never feel like they had anything in common. He was never really in the picture. He remembered everything that happened after his father left, before the outbreak of the monsters in the real world. But why did he? Why now? Ariana, Dora, and Drake missed him a lot but had managed to move on in a way. Perhaps he'd be back one day, they all thought. But now he was standing there, in Drake's nightmare, looking at the scenery without emotion. They didn't move, but right before everything turned dark again, the house disappeared and they were left in only darkness. His father fell and eventually disappeared out of sight. His sister fell backwards and seemed to have died. He wanted to know if she really did, but would never get an answer. What was happening to his family? Drake saw his family die. But for what? All of it could have broken someone with ease, but not Drake. He knew how to stay strong and remain hopeful. He was strong enough to keep going. And he did. Drake screamed like never before as he awoke from his sleep. He leaned forward and emitted flames and fireballs into all kinds of directions. The Elder came in, who barely managed to dodge a fireball. He took a few steps back. Drake, Drake, it's not real. They were just nightmares. But nothing seemed to calm him. Drake looked terrified, and his emotions led him to emitting fire that destroyed his surroundings. The Elder had to take a gamble. He exited the room and came back with a bucket of water a few seconds later. He tossed the water over him and succeeded in cooling him. Drake started to calm down and had stopped emitting flames. He was slowly losing control and almost fell sideways until the Elder managed to prevent him from falling. He laid him down and saw him fall asleep again. Sleep well, Drake, he said. Drake's dark nights were over, though it happened much sooner than the Elder thought. Drake could finally sleep peacefully, even though that could still take days. And though his dark nights were over, the dark days were closing in.